Welcome this day, 21st of February. Why is that significant? Well, I'll come to that. But first, while it's fresh in the mind, I want to share an experience I had last Friday morning. That was waking up in bed and looking across the room and to the chair where I normally sit by the fireplace. In that split second, I'm also seeing myself in the bed where the chair was, or where the chair is, I should say. I'm also experiencing sitting in the chair where the bed is. Further to that, I'm experiencing both being in the chair and the bed in both sort of physical locations, shall we say. The only way I can describe it would be to say if you compare a photograph with its counterpart negative, because I saw everything where light became shadow, shadow became light, and it sort of knocked me for the rest of the day. It's like, wow. I asked to be shown something, and the universe, the interactive field, whatever you want to call it, it certainly responded, because I feel what I was actually shown was just a brief snapshot of what we conceptualize or call God, the creator, source, the oversoul, whatever label you apply to it. Now imagine I've just experienced in that moment of being myself, shall we say, and seeing myself in 6 variations all at the same time in that moment. It opens up so many questions about realities, parallel universes, and so on. Make of it what you will. But imagine that's a micro version. I feel what was shown was what this source, this creator can do. It's in everything at the same time, and all computations. Interestingly though, it was all 3-dimensional in what I was seeing and experiencing, and what I was visualizing in the mind from seeing this, because my eyes were open and yet I'm seeing the pictures in the mind. They just sort of flash, like it's like you're watching a cinema screen in your head, as it were. So it's like, wow, that left me speechless. But so I thought I'd share that anyway. Why did I mention the significance of the 21st today being the 21st of February? Well, as far as I know, it's the first day of Pisces. But it's something Jason says, when there are so many coincidences. This is Jason on Archaic's channel. When there are so many coincidences, it shows that there is no coincidence. And I can refer you back to a playlist I did on breaking down the word and also the definition. So you can look up on any computer search the definition of the word coincidence. When things coincide. But the key word in the definition of it is when there are no apparent, there's nothing apparent that links a series of events or a series of things that all coordinate at the same time. Things we experience or whatever. Synchronicities is another name for it. Tapping into the collective field would be another way of expressing it. So let's get my thoughts back. I slipped again. Bring myself back to present, and then we'll carry on. This is unfortunately what happens. Things dissolve in the moment and in the mind, and then hopefully, as long as you don't chase them, they will come back. And at the moment, it's not happening. Yeah, so 21st of February, that was it, about the coincidences. The key word in that is there is nothing apparent. Well, if you consider the word apparent, you would describe a ghost, for example, as being an apparition, because it's something that appears. But what happens when there is no apparition, when there is no physical thing, no objects that you can point to and say that has linked this to this? It's exactly true. So there is such a thing as a coincidence. It's like everything else, you're told half the story about it. Anyway, we'll get on to the subject and why February the 21st. I feel I had to laugh when I saw this. Jason of Archaics has given humanity the blueprint that pulls the rug under discussions about what shape the Earth is. It becomes meaningless and pointless. That's just one example. When you can take these patterns, these isometric markers and blueprints, and apply it to something where you may have a greater knowledge than most people, because it may be something you're interested in, so you've looked into something in greater depth than most people would. It's amazing what comes up. So what I want to do is look at the 138-year period between the two Phoenix years. If you don't know what a Phoenix year is, then I suggest you go and watch Archaic's channel. But basically, 1764, and then the next one's 1902. There is, shall we say, a reset. There are certain things that happen, and you get events with isometric markers. You'll get an event, and then you'll get a marker year, and an equal number of years the other side of that marker, you'll get a very similar event. For example, the uprising in Leipzig in 1848, I think it was, 1848, 1849. The Phoenix year is 1902. That is the marker for that, because when you come to 1956, you've got the Hungarian uprising. So you've got an area of Central Europe that was, the uprising was crushed by the powers that be in both cases. The same event basically playing out, just set in a slightly different time period and a slightly different location. It's like playing the same theatre show out, but playing it out in a new theatre. You can see the sort of pattern with the Earth. So anyway, taking these two Phoenix years and viewing this from the perspective through art, specifically through the composers of the Germanic world, and through basically the history of the symphony, I thought I would add in three further composers, contemporaries of Beethoven, that are very much overshadowed and almost forgotten, but are starting to make a revival. So one of these is Carl Czerny, an Austrian composer. Most of the time, the only mention or reference to him is as being a pupil of Beethoven and a tutor of Franz Liszt. And would you believe his birth date is 21st of February? And it's like, well, what are the chances? Because I only checked back on the information prior to making this video and actually spotted his actual birth date rather than just the year. So the three composers I'm sort of adding into this equation are Louis Spohr, born in 1784 and died in 1859. Carl Czerny, born 1791, died 1857, and Johann Nepomuk Hummel, born 1778 and died in 1837. Right, so we need to take the story back. Now, art is pretty much reflects what nature does. It gradually unfolds. There's no actual cut-off. In terms of classical music, you have specific periods within this last 1,000 years. So what is actually classical starts around 1764, the Phoenix year. And then it transitions to what is called the Romantic period, about 1815, 1820-ish, right through to 1902. So we're going to have to start prior to 1764 where this story starts. Now, 1750 is a huge marker. Two giants in the musical world, very much held in high regard today, Johann Sebastian Bach and George Friedrich Handel, both died in 1750. That sort of is like a closing of a chapter, as it were. So anyway, this Johann Sebastian Bach had a rather large number of children, and three of the sons composed symphonic works. Now, interestingly, one of them dies at the age of 47, the other two die at the age of 74, which sort of ties in with that 1-4-7-2-5-8-3-6-9 pattern. So the three Bach sons are Wilhelm Friedemann Bach, born 1710 and died in 1784. 1784 is the year that Louis Spohr was born. Next is Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, born 1714, died in 1788. And would you believe, where are we? I've lost my place. No, sorry, forget that one. And then you have Johann Christoph Bach, 1735 to 1782. He's the one that only lived 47 years. 1782 is the year of Beethoven's first composition. Now, Johann Nepomuk Hummel, an interesting composer in terms of this numerology. 1778, the year that Hummel is born, is the same year that Beethoven gives his first concert performance in Cologne. It's the same year that Mozart meets J.C. Bach in Paris. The year that Hummel dies, 1837, is the year that Cosima Wagner is born, the daughter of Franz Liszt and later the wife of the composer Richard Wagner. All coincidences, of course. These things, this story through art, through the symphony, through various composers is just incredible. So in particular, Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach was a huge influence on Joseph Haydn, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and Ludwig van Beethoven, all held him in high regard. Now he is born in 1732, exactly 32 years before the Phoenix year 1764. Haydn is known as the father of the symphony, and he was to write no less than 104 symphonies over a 38-year period beginning around 1757. This is 1 year after the birth of Mozart. 1772 is the premiere of Haydn's Farewell Symphony, the year Beethoven believed he was born. 1756 is the birth year of Mozart. In his 35 years, the midpoint year of his life is 1773, and that is exactly halfway in his symphonic output year, 24 years. 1773 being the year that divides his Salzburg symphony period into early and late. In total, Mozart writes 41 numbered symphonies, plus a further 20 unnumbered symphonies. His first symphony and beginning of his 24-year period commences in the Phoenix year 1764, his last in 1788, which is the year... No, I've got that wrong. I'm thinking of 1778. So his last symphony in 1788 is known as Jupiter. Is it coincidence that many in the astrology circles talk about going into a Jupiterian age? So 1770 was the year that Beethoven was born. The name Beethoven means better garden. It's a Dutch name. Beethoven's midlife year is 1797, the year of Schubert's birth. Beethoven wrote 9 symphonies and an incomplete 10th. His symphonic output spans 26 years, 1811 being the centre year and the birth year of Franz Liszt. Beethoven's creative period begins in 1782, the year of J.C. Bach's death. This is his Bonn period until 1792, 1 year after the death of Mozart. 1791 is also the year that Carl Czerny was born. I'm sorry this is a little bit all over the place, but I hope you can start to see the years that composers are born, their midlife markers in their artistically creative period become markers for the births, deaths of other composers. So to carry on, Beethoven is seen as having 3 periods. The early period, 1792 to 1803, the middle period, 1803 to 1814, which is known as his heroic period, and then the late period from 1814 to 1827. So you get a sequence there of 9 years in the early period, 11 years in the middle period, and then a further, what are we looking at here, 13 years in the late period. And you can break these periods down into the early period was when he could hear, the middle period was when he acknowledged he was losing his hearing, and the late period he was completely deaf. 1786 is the birth year of Carl Maria von Weber, a German composer who did much to promote singing in German rather than Italian. His short 40-year lifespan has a midlife marker year of 1806, the same year he wrote his 2 symphonies. 1826 is the year that Weber dies. Then in 1827 Beethoven, and then in 1828 Schubert. So you've got the deaths of 3 prominent figures in music dying consecutive years, 3 years in a row. That repeats later on. We'll come to that. Franz Schubert was born in 1797, Beethoven's midlife year. Schubert's short lifespan of just 31 years has a midlife year as 1812. All but one of his 9 symphonies date from his latter half lifespan. The Beethoven heroic period from 1803 to 1814 sees the birth of a son increase of composer that mirrors the post-1902 Phoenix event in the emergence of new companies in the business as opposed to the music world. So 1803, the birth of Hector Berlioz. In his 66 years until 1869, you have a 369 reference there, he wrote 4 symphonies in the decade 1830 to 1840, his midlife marker being 1836. 1809 is the midpoint year in Beethoven's heroic period. That is the birth year of Felix Mendelssohn, who wrote 5 symphonies between 1824 and 1842, so you've got a mirrored 2 and 4 there. The midpoints to his lifespan are 1828, the year of Schubert's death, and a creative span of his symphonies, the year 1833. This year is the midpoint year between 2 Phoenix events. And if memory serves me correctly, 1833 is the year that Johannes Brahms is born. Next we have Robert Schumann, born in 1810, writes 4 symphonies in the second half of his lifespan of 46 years, his death occurring in 1856. This also means 1833 is his midlife marker. Also born in 1810 is the Polish composer and pianist Frédéric Chopin. Now, he doesn't write any symphonies, but his death year is 1849. So his midlife marker years are between 1829 and 1830. This is 1 year after the death of Schubert and marks the commencement of the 13 symphonic poems by his near contemporary Franz Liszt. Franz Liszt, born 1811, died 1886, developed the Berlioz sound in his symphonic tone poems effectively through composed works as opposed to separate movements. Liszt founded the new German music school at Weimar, birthplace of Goethe, in 1849. Liszt's midlife marker is 1848, which is the year of the Dresden Uprising. I think I said Leipzig earlier, I apologise, it was actually Dresden. Talking of Leipzig, the next composer on our list is the composer Richard Wagner, born 1813, died in 1883. The year 1848 is highly significant with the 2 composers regarded as musical revolutionaries, and the year 1848 was a year of revolutions that swept across Europe, echoes of 1812, with 2 composers both born either side of this year 1812, that being Liszt and Wagner. So where are we? 1833, that year again. The mid-year between Phoenix events marks also the year of the birth of Brahms and the first of 3 early operas by Wagner, in a style influenced by Weber and Berlioz. By 1840, the year of Tchaikovsky's birth, Wagner had developed his own sound and began to develop a revolution in art. His next 3 works in the operatic genre are composed between 1840 and 1848. These 3 operas, The Flying Dutchman, Tannhäuser, and Lohengrin, have themes reflected in his later trilogy, Tristan and Isolde, The Meisters of Nuremberg, and Parsifal. Both sets of 3 share either a ship scene, basis in history of a song contest of minstrel knights, and the Grail theme. In addition, the Norse Bible, the Eddas, was preserved into the 4 evening music dramas that make up the Ring of the Nibelungs, written between 1848 and 1874. This ring cycle was first performed in Wagner's own creation, his music theatre, in 1876, and has been performed there ever since. 1876 also marks the centenary of the formation of the United States. Next we come to Anton Bruckner, who is born in 1824. Now I would say in a way almost his opposite is Johann Nepomuk Hummel, who is distinguished as not writing any symphonies but writing many piano concertos. I think it's about 8, might be more. I'd have to check back. But Bruckner didn't write any concertos and is mostly known for his symphonies. He uses the Beethoven templates. Bruckner's 70 years to 1896 give a midlife marker of 1859. This year, together with 1858 and 1860, Bruckner composed no compositions. Also, 1859 is the year that Louis Spohr died. Bruckner writes 11 symphonies in a 33-year period between 1863 and 1896. Yes, so 1833, Johannes Brahms is born. He writes 4 symphonies between 1854 and 1885. His midlife year marker is 1863, the year that Bruckner commences his symphonic writing. Next we have Antonin Dvorak, born in 1841, who composes 9 symphonies between 1865 and 1893. 1865 is the birth year of Jean Sibelius. Yes, and death as well. We have 1847, we have Mendelssohn, and then Chopin in 1849. 1893, last completed work by Bruckner Helgoland, is also the year that is the death of Tchaikovsky. I'm just reading through and trying to condense the notes because I know this is getting rather long and can seem a bit heady, but make of it what you will. Is it just coincidence? And then look into what coincidence is. But there's something else you can do with this blueprint with finding isometric markers, and that is apply it to your own life. Consider significant events, when you've flown, when you've gone on holiday, when you've started a new job, different events in your life, and see if you can find markers. I'm pretty certain what you will find a lot of the time specifically are 7-year cycles and 3.5-year cycles, which is 1,260 days, which is highly significant. See the Neville Goddard lecture on that. You can find that on the Brian Scott channel or in the Neville Goddard playlist on this channel. So when you start applying it to your own life, you can refer also to Rudolf Steiner. You have this cycle of 7 years. So 7 years is roughly the marker when you get to your adult teeth and lose your baby teeth. Your own homegrown teeth rather than what was grown when you were a fetus. Next you have puberty, which is roughly around the age of 14, and then a huge significant marker in legal terms, the age of 21, and of course it would have carried on with spiritual growth, but humanity is going through a devolution, not an evolution. But we're in a realm of duality, so within that devolution there is also an evolution of those that still have that spark of individuality about them. I'm going to say that's not to make a judgment, because did the ones that are not taking a spiritual path and not seeing outside of what you can touch and see and feel, and looking beyond the 5 senses of the external, maybe that was the path they chose or agreed to before they came here. I'm not making any judgments on that. That's their choice. From my perspective, it doesn't seem the most beneficial choice to oneself. So I know it's a lot of information there, and this has gone on for rather a long enough anyway. But I hope you'll see that there is a pattern that you can discern about yourself. Notice the word discern. I'm not going to say any more on that, but words reveal so much. Think of the word prophet. Now, what are we talking about? Are we talking about in terms of finances, or are we talking about someone who's predicting the future? See what I mean about words? So I'm going to say love to you all, and hopefully that you can see there's a blueprint which you can apply to your own life. You can find midpoint markers, and you can find events that will keep playing out like repeat cycles in your own life, and through that you're armed with a knowledge through self-experience and re-examination of self, and you can break the pattern and break the cycle and step outside of the external script that is continuously being pushed towards you all the time. And you can radiate out and create your own script using these blueprints. That's only part of it. There's a lot of internal work to do with all of these things. But hopefully that will help some of you out there. All that requires for me to say is just, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, keep living the dream, but any donations are really welcome at the moment. As much as anything else, I wish to buy more seeds so I can plant more things. I've been planting potatoes and courgettes, squashes, or melons, I can't even remember which now, and kale, so starting those off in pots, and then I've got the land prepared for them to grow. Anyway, that is rather long for this video, so I'm going to say love to you all, and hopefully that has benefited some of you out there.